Specific plans to add a 4th Street extension to the incipient Milwaukee streetcar line, an update on efforts to mitigate lead in water service lines, and the role that judges play in ensuring public safety in Milwaukee. This is Council Rewind, and I'm Dustin Weiss. With recent headlines about car thieves reoffending before they've ever stood trial, critics have called into question the role that the courts can or should play in public safety. Later in the program, a couple of judges explain to the Public Safety Committee their roles in the justice process. But first, the streetcars are picked out and the tracks will soon be installed for Milwaukee's downtown streetcar line. But with the groundbreaking on a new Milwaukee Bucks basketball arena on 4th Street, city officials are looking for ways to connect that development with other buildings going up downtown.
And so the 4th Street extension that these files relate to, again, would start at the intermodal station. It would go northbound on 5th Street, and it would cut through the Redevelopment Authority-owned parking lot at 4th and Wisconsin, and then continue northbound on 4th Street up to the new arena. And then would also go southbound on 4th Street from the arena down to the intermodal station. So this route is not just connecting the intermodal station to the arena, but there's significant traffic generators along this route, such as the Wisconsin Center Convention Center, MATC, UWM Panther Arena, Old World 3rd Street, Turner Hall, over 1,200 residential units that have been built over the last 5 or 6 years in Westtown, and 2,500 hotel rooms. So this is hitting on a number of existing traffic generators, but also a lot of the new development that's planned in Westtown, such as Marquette University's Athletic Research Center that's going to be breaking ground next year at 7th and Michigan, the Arena District, which you're all familiar with. So with all that activity happening in Westtown, including projects that have been before you, such as the Posner Building and the Germania Building, we feel that now is the time to be marketing our parking lot at 4th and Wisconsin. So we put out an RFP last week. This is a rendering that DCD put together looking southwest at what is now a parking lot. That's the Hilton Hotel in the background, and this is the Boston store here, showing how the streetcar could cut through the site and create a really unique transit-oriented development opportunity, very similar to how the Couture utilizes the streetcar going through it at the lakefront. We see a very similar opportunity here. This also shows the county's proposed bus rapid transit line running from the Couture to the county grounds as integral to this intersection of the streetcar and the BRT at this site.
Dan, is it fair to say that this is nothing more than conceptual?
Correct. This is a concept. The streetcar does need to come through the site roughly in this fashion, but all the private
so if somebody wanted
to
build a big 42-story couture type building and run under a tunnel with some open 1st and 2nd floor development, you'd be more than happy with that here from the Department of Development.
The way the RFP is written is you can build over it or you can build alongside it as shown here. Anticipated schedule for the extension. The Tiger Grant was submitted in April, and we will hear about that probably in September of this year. That's usually when they make the announcements on the Tiger Grant. And if we're awarded, we will go into final design, order another vehicle for this extension, and begin construction with that being complete in 2019. And then this extension would be operational in 2020. The overall budget for the 4th Street extension is approximately $40 million, and you can see it broken out here. The majority of that is for the actual construction work of the extension, but it also does include purchasing an additional vehicle for that extension. And then the proposed sources are a $20 million Tiger Grant that we applied for, and then the 3 TIDs that are in front of you. We're proposing to create one new district, TID 88 at 4th and Wisconsin, and amend 2 existing districts. We're creating, again, one new district, which would be TID number 88 at 4th and Wisconsin. It would comprise of 2 properties, the Redevelopment Authority-owned parking lot at 4th and Wisconsin, and the parking structure owned by Zilber to the south, so basically one city block. We are proposing that new district contributes $8 million towards the $20 million local match. And so I think later this year, we'll have a much better idea of what type of project we're going to see at 4th and Wisconsin. But to give you an idea of what type of development we would need on that site to pay this district off by year 18, it would either be a 200-room hotel, similar to the Marriott that was built at Milwaukee and Wisconsin a few years ago, a 200-unit apartment building, such as the Buckler just to the south of here, or a 200-unit student housing development, similar to the 2040 lofts at Marquette University. So those are sizable projects, but we don't need a huge 20-story building at this site to pay off this district.
We are asking for the full market value of this in the RFP. Our intention is not to subsidize this with additional city dollars. Our hope is that the private sector can carry the development of this project based on the merits of the cost of the dirt and the development itself. We are asking for this portion for the TID for the actual streetcar, but we're not looking to invest money into the building itself. We've been very specific about that in the RFP.
The Westtown Board actually took a position in 2009 advocating for the starter system of the streetcar, knowing that transportation would be a key to the economic development in the Westtown area. At that time, they had significant dialogue about 4th Street being a part of the starter system and had hoped and advocated for that. It turned out that there was a lack of funds to do that, but as a result of that, we really believe that this is the time to add 4th Street as to extend the system down 4th Street.
We believe that the streetcar heading to 4th Street is the only way we can get it to Bronzeville, the only way we can get it to King Drive. I think the timing is right for this to occur.
Is it going to Bronzeville next?
Next logical place is to go north. We're almost there. And we also, as Dan indicated earlier, would have funds to spend on the early engineering and preliminary design for that, because we have a TID that allows us to spend money in that quadrant.
Back in the day when the Sears building was on Fond du Lac, I saw some tracks. Is there any, are those tracks still active? Can we activate them towards the streetcar one day?
No, they're not. They're not. Actually,
They're
we quite routinely on an annual basis will dig up old streetcar tracks and remove them as a part of paving projects. So
They're gone.
yeah, they're
All right.
unusable.
We got to put them back.
Got to put them back.
The streetcar financing plan passed the full council on an 11-4 vote. Every house in Milwaukee gets its water from a service line that connects it to a water main in the street. And in houses built before 1950, very often that service line was made of toxic lead. The city treats its water to keep that lead from leaching into the water that we drink, but the long-term solution is to remove those lead pipes. Ever since tests showed that the process for removing those pipes causes a temporary uptick in water lead levels, though, the Department of Public Works has been looking for a solution. On June 23rd, they gave an update to the Steering and Rules Committee.
And just as a reminder, there is no lead in Lake Michigan water. There is no lead in water when it leaves our water treatment plants. There is no lead in water when it goes into the water mains that are underneath the streets in our community. Where the lead exists is in the water service line that connects the water main in the street to the building itself. And there are two halves to that water service line. One half between the water main and the property line is owned and maintained by Milwaukee Water Works, and the part between the property line and the water meter inside the basement is owned and maintained by the property owner. So that's an important distinction. In almost all cases, those service lines are either lead all the way from the water main to the basement or copper all the way from the water main to the basement. Most of those lead service lines in the city of Milwaukee were put in on houses that were built before 1951. It was the way things were done in the olden days. They've been in the ground. That was the requirement back then. They've been put in. There are about 70,000 of the 160,000 lead service lines in Milwaukee are made of lead. So almost half are lead, the other half are copper. The Waterworks has been treating for lead in water since 1996. A rule from the EPA came out in 1991, and it was determined that our water did not meet the criteria for that rule when it first came out. We were required then to treat the water for it. So we add a phosphate compound to the water at the treatment plants, and that goes into the pipes, and it basically forms a little coating on the inside of the pipe that keeps the lead mostly in the pipes and from getting into the water. So it has done a remarkable job in reducing the lead levels in water throughout our entire community.
And we've been doing that since?
1996.
Recapping, since the last time we were in front of this committee, of course in January, a lot of media activity from the mayor, and we brought forward to this committee and briefed a number of council members on what the issue is, what the plans are, next steps, and happy, of course, to be here again updating you. We did mail about 70,000 letters to Waterworks customers, and those are customers we've identified as having lead service lines. That went out February 4th, and that was English and Spanish, double-sided, and it went to the residents as opposed to the owners. So the users of water in those properties got those. There were 385 daycares that we identified through state licensing data that got letters in late April from Commissioner Baker and the Health Department advising them that they did have a lead service line, steps to take to reduce the risk of contamination there. The Waterworks staff is out there making field contacts, including letters before many projects, door hangers, and an actual staff door knock in the case of a disrupted service line. Those properties are typically offered free and voluntary testing. And then we've published a lot of this information simultaneously on the Waterworks website and in other places, including the full list of identified lead service line properties. So if customers are interested, they can go right to milwaukee.gov/water and see that. And again, the key messages we've been trying to put out to customers are flushing works. That is the way to get to that safe daily use in your water. And then testing kids 3 times before they're 3 years old is probably one of the most important things, I think.
We recommend, and the American Academy of Pediatrics also recommends that that we screen children for lead at least 3 times before the 3rd year of life. And the reason for that is the rapid development of children. They're most at risk for exposure. So we work with pediatricians, the medical community, and most of all, we try to message to parents that when they're doing well baby visits and follow-ups, they do that. So a pediatrician, any medical provider will do that lead screening, and they will do the testing. So we want doctors, we want children to have a medical home, we want them to have that priority. So when we see kids, and we see thousands of kids every month within the city in our clinics, we're always checking to see if they've had that test done. If they have a medical home, we're referring back to that provider. We also can screen as well.
So for the 2017 budget, what is the mayor proposing as both in the water department and as part of perhaps dealing with the addressing of the issue of the private side in his budget for 2017?
Although I don't think any numbers are final, we're looking at reestablishing the water main program as was contemplated that has the lead services on them, and the cost associated with that would be a starting point from a city budget perspective. Not having the private part cost identified. We could be relying on the next $1 million grant. It's still really in a
So I just want to be clear, there's no money right now projected for the city's purpose of paying for private removal of lead laterals in the 2017 budget.
Yeah, Dennis Yacarino from the Budget Office. We are looking into that, and it's still part of the mayor's it could be part of the mayor's proposal, or it will be part of the mayor's proposal. We just don't have the numbers all set and actually what we're going to recommend for the cost distribution, but it will be part of his budget. Just today, I can't tell you what it is, because we're working on it.
Well, can you tell me how many homes he projects to be completed or remediated
Well, we know if we just spend the state money, it'll be 250.
out of 70,000?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's not necessarily the way we'll do that.
Eventually, given the enormity of this program or project, that what you're suggesting will happen. But I honestly don't think it would be practical for us to start such an initiative right off the bat. We need to get some low-hanging fruit. We gotta get some stuff done, and that may be the outsourcing the work may be the most efficient way for now, just to learn in terms of efficiencies, cost per lateral, what it takes, timing, all the logistics. And I assure you, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, a program as you're suggesting will exist.
We think that a 30 to 50-year time frame is what it's really going to take to get through all of these 70,000 lead service lines at, a reasonable pace. The EPA is currently changing and we'll try for the first part of it. The mayor will have something in the 2017 budget. Right now, we have 15 miles of water main to be replaced in our next year's budget, and that 15 miles includes about 500 lead services. It will take about another $3 million to replace the city side of those lead services along with our capital program. So some of this for the water utility will be on capital, but some of it will be on O&M, because any of those leaks and those spot replacements that aren't associated with the water main replacements are really our operating budget. And that, of course, all of this is, of course, funded by our rates.
I know that the cost is scary, and I can hardly believe that I'm advocating for something like this. However,
I know, I'm getting ready to check your ID.
However, the long term, okay, 25 and 50 years from now, I think it's going to cost us more. Okay, and it's who has the courage to say we're going to do it now?
I think it's very easy to throw out and say, let's do it now, but then the reality is we have imposed on us by the state of Wisconsin a property tax freeze. So this is a matter of priorities. And if the council and the mayor feel fit that this is the number one priority and we want to make that investment, then the reality is you have to make cuts in other departments because you cannot raise property taxes. So if that is the course and direction we want to pursue, then every department will end up having some cuts.
I just think having a 50-year plan just seems to be not acceptable right off the bat. I mean, we really have to be far more aggressive, even if there's a shock to the price tag. We need to know what the options are. And let's get an understanding with how Madison did it, because I do know that there was some private contribution to that.
I can explain to that if you like.
Yeah, I mean, possibly doing these special assessments and having a contribution and incentivizing that. I don't think we have much conversation about that type of cost sharing and using the resources that we have to incentivize an accelerated use of that, especially in the areas where we feel like we have a more vulnerable population. That's a way of incentivizing folks to actually participate in getting their laterals replaced, especially if they have the ability to make a contribution toward it.
The report was placed on file. With issues like shootings, carjackings, and youth crimes making prominent headlines recently, the Public Safety Committee has continued its series of special meetings to bring together stakeholders in the justice system and see how they might work together. One hearing on June 27th featured an appearance by Chief Milwaukee County Circuit Court Judge Maxine Aldrich White, who explained that judges can't just lock up anyone who's accused of a crime.
We are guided by the rules that the Supreme Court gave us, and I think they revamped them and restated them in 1994, that the circuit trial courts and the other courts that we administer are to protect individual rights, privileges, and liberties, to maintain the rule of law, and to provide a forum for the resolution of disputes. That forum has to be just and it has to be accessible. So there's been some misperception about the role of the court. No matter how many arrests occur, no matter how many DA interventions there are, no matter whatever happens, we are duty bound under the state law, the federal and the state constitution, to handle each case, one case at a time. One offender at a time, one victim at a time. A set of rules and a set of laws, and I know you are operating by rules yourself, govern each and everything that we do. So what we are duty bound to do is to deploy our resources in a way that's responsible.
And the purpose of these meetings is not to point fingers or place blame. The purpose of these meetings is to substantively address the concerns that we're having and that we're faced with in the city of Milwaukee. And out of these discussions, we want to create and implement an action plan of steps that need to be taken to improve the overall safety of our citizens. The case is the latest example of a person accused of a violent crime being released on bail only to be arrested again. Now, when we hear from, and when constituents read this, when we read it, it lends itself to the belief that we're dysfunctional, that we as government can't seem to get a handle on this situation. And as one fellow pointed out to me, it seems government is becoming just as dysfunctional as certain segments of the community we're supposed to be governing.
The thing that I guard against, and all of the judges throughout the Wisconsin court system guard against, is re-victimizing victims. And what I mean by that is, when we start to prosecute and try a case in the public forum, we have to do a do-over. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a do-over. When someone is tried and a higher court decides that they did not get a just day in court, that the case was tried or tainted in some way, and we fail to follow the constitutional parameters in our state and federal constitution, if our Court of Appeal and Supreme Court sends it back, and we do have some do-overs, it's painful. So I will not discuss, neither will any of the judges seated with me or on the bench with me or throughout this state, any pending case. I will talk to you about some of the parameters under which the court operates. And that is that when bail is set, we follow the legislative dictate. And that is the purpose of money in the statutes of Wisconsin is to only be considered to ensure that someone returns to court to answer the charge.
The perception that some kids end up with a myriad of carjacking crimes and get a slap on their hand and are sent right back in home is not my experience at Children's Court. The judges can only deal with petitions that are filed after an arrest and a prosecutor looks at the case and brings it in front of the court. We may never have the information in front of us that the police have. 16 arrests, those kinds of things. But we do our best with the resources we have on a daily basis to try to figure this out.
We are finding in many cases that these kids that are getting picked up, this is the second, third, fourth, fifth offense. And I guess at what stage is enough enough? Okay, I don't have a problem with giving people a chance. Okay, but at a certain stage, when people are calling and say, how is this the fourth offense? How is this kid still out there? How do you answer that?
I would hope that I would have the opportunity to staff that case with you on behalf of your constituents, to see if the arrest resulted in anything that a judicial officer was duty-bound to consider or decide. And so, as a former prosecutor, there were a lot of times that we got an opportunity to keep what we got because it was illegal substances, but we never got a prosecution. And I'm not blaming anybody for the result of their work, because sometimes the arrest will result in something that's a municipal citation, and that's the best they could do, because there's a lack of cooperation on the street, Well, a lot of them were running and you didn't know who dropped what. So there's an arrest, but there's also a process of defining and discovering, is there evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed by this individual that we can move forward to sanction or punish. This is a small group of kids. If we are not smart enough to stop them in their tracks, then there's something wrong with us. So what we need to do, what all of the judges have said is, come to that conference room at 609 at the courthouse and sit down with us and tell us what you need to do your jobs better. But there are lanes, folks. We gotta stay in our lane. If we're gonna keep that robe on, it is not negotiable. The Supremes will take us out if we start trying people on the streets of Milwaukee and not in the courtroom. That's a serious charge that I take seriously. Because there are a number of us who haven't had the protection of the laws of this land as citizens in America. And when I got to be part of the ones who maintain the rule of law and make sure it's applied fairly, impartially, and just, I'm going to work as hard as I can for the colleagues that I desperately love and that sit in the South. It hurts them when they hear the voices from afar saying how they don't care. They're human beings. They are really hurt.
What are we doing with parents? I mean, how are we getting them better engaged in supervision of their children? And it seems like we're talking about the juveniles and we don't talk enough about parent accountability in some of these situations.
There are certainly a group of juveniles that we don't see their parents, and they might be those dual status kids where the parents are drug addicted or have other issues going on in their lives so that they aren't present. But we may have a caregiver, we may have a grandparent, we may have an uncle that shows up at these court proceedings. For some of these kids that are taking vehicles, we are seeing parents that are responsible for them, and they're coming into court. I know a case where there's a mother, the kid is on supervision right now, and he's with Running Rebels doing fairly well, and mom goes to play basketball with him every weekend. So it runs the gamut.
Part of the system is responsible for making sure that young people have programs so that they get it before they return to society, whether that's counseling, whether it's educational attainment before they leave, whether it's volunteer service or the like. Is that you guys or is that DOC? Can you just expound on that for a bit?
Sure. So any child that is committed to the Department of Corrections, they are supervised by the state. So while they're in the institution and when they're in aftercare out in the community, but still potentially are still on an order to corrections, the state is responsible for all those things. Now they may contract with the county, they may work with other service providers, but they're supposed to bring those competencies to bear. In 2017, the county is looking at taking over the aftercare portion of a stay at Lincoln Hills. So once that child is deemed appropriate to be released to the community by the state, the county will provide those services in the community with which the kid is released to.
But we fell at a, was it 60+% rate with recidivism?
Right now, the state is responsible for all that aftercare. Those are their numbers over a 3-year period, whether the child is charged with another crime, found and charged with another crime. So it's a very stringent recidivism rule.
With that, though, again, I want to extend our heartfelt thanks for being here. And again, reiterate, we are very much interested in getting your input and the steps that you feel need to occur, both with the adults and the juveniles that you're dealing with.
The committee asked the court to provide a list of recommendations on the matter. And that's a look back at some of the important issues from the most recent Common Council cycle. For the City Channel and Council Rewind, I'm Dustin Weiss.